You're listening to another episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns.
That's right, everybody. It's another live football episode of Tap Outs and Touchdowns. As always, it's your guy, Bully Rye. And you may notice something different about the guy sitting next to me tonight. That is not Banker Bill. That is the founder, the creator, the curator of Boom Broadcasting, my friend, my former co-host of the Cat Cave, Michael Davis. Mike, what's going on, bud?
I'm not Bill?
You're not Bill. No, you are not Bill.
I was told I could be Bill for the day. That's the only reason I'm here.
No, that's not what we agreed to.
Okay.
That's not what we agreed to. All right, guys. If you're joining us on the show live, we don't have any viewers yet, but if you do go to join the show, words are hard. You can tell it's been a couple weeks since I've been here. Make sure you leave a comment wherever it is that you're watching to join the conversation. Facebook.com/tapoutsandtouchdowns. On Instagram at Ryan Frick Comedy, as well as the YouTube at Tap Outs and Touchdowns. Remember, we don't go live on X anymore because they want your money to do so. So we don't do it. But anyway, it's been a couple weeks since since Tap Outs and Touchdowns has been live. I guess I can give you a little feedback on what I've been going through. 2 weeks ago, Banker Bill and I were on a cruise with 14 other of Bill's friends and family. It was a great time. We celebrated 25 years of his and his wife's marriage. They had a renewal ceremony in Cozumel, Mexico. It was a great time. He's actually not here tonight because tonight is Shauna, his wife's birthday. So happy birthday, Shauna, as well. And that is why he is not here. But in that trip to Cozumel, I should have brought the hat with me. There was this really cool bucket hat that had Lions logos all over it. It had Cozumel, Mexico on the front. And I bought one, and we ended up getting Bill a Miami Dolphins one. And I got too excited to, hey, we got the same hat, like the dork that I am. And I forgot that not only was my wallet in my right pocket, my phone was in my left pocket. And the long story short of that is that I did not have a phone for the rest of the week and lost a bunch of stuff. Now, fortunately, I should be able to recover a lot of that stuff now. But for about a week, I thought that I lost 4 years of my memories, like videos, photos, text messages were all gone. And I don't know how to sort of relate that to anybody else. But imagine if you felt like all your memories that you had physical, like tangible proof of, just didn't exist. And so last week, Banker Bill was a little under the weather. This week, celebrating his wife's birthday. And not to mention last week, I was in no mindset to do a show. But we are back here. And there has been a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of weeks when it comes to college and the NFL. Mama Frick is in the house. Hey, Mom, thanks for joining us down in Charleston. Shout out to my brother-in-law who got out of the hospital today. He had surgery yesterday, recovering well and was already sent home. So good for him. And Mom's helping out with my niece and my nephew. So she's got her hands full, and we're here to talk some football, and that's what we're going to do. And without further ado, if you watch the show, you know my favorite segment of the show is Homer's Corner. And you know where I'm going with this because I'm rocking my Gamecock gear today. Gamecock football, since we have been off the show, has blown out Texas A&M, has blown out a ranked Vanderbilt team, and last weekend blew a 15-point lead to a ranked Missouri team, only to come back and win with 15 seconds left to play in the game. The Gamecocks now sit at 7-3 with a chance to go 9-3. And in that touchdown that was scored at 15 seconds, Trey Tolles reminded me that there was an earthquake that took place. There was seismic activity when Lenora Sellers hit Rocket Sanders for a shovel pass They went into the end zone that gave the Carolina their lead, and they never looked back. So now South Carolina sits at 7-3 on the season. I said preseason that 7-5 was the floor, and people kind of looked at me funny. I said that we had a chance to beat Oklahoma. We beat the crap out of Oklahoma. I thought that 7-5 was a good floor, and if we lose out, which we're not losing to Wofford this weekend, we would be 7-5. Having said all that, I would like to make a case, and I'll probably double down next week on the fact that I think South Carolina has a legitimate shot and should have a legitimate shot to somehow sneak into the college football playoff conversation. And I know what Michael Davis is thinking, because Bill would probably be thinking the same thing. But if you look at the college football top 25, there are a lot of teams with 1 and 2 losses, but they don't have a single win that is comparable to any of South Carolina's wins. South Carolina will have or did play 7 ranked opponents this season. They lost by 2 on the road at Alabama. We lost in a game that was stolen by poor officiating against a ranked LSU team that kind of hurts our conversation when they got blown up by Florida last weekend. And the only team that we really kind of got beat down by was Ole Miss, who sits in the top 10 in the college football playoff rankings right now. But if you look at other teams, my brother-in-law says hello. Zach, good to see you. If you look at some of the other teams in the top 10, Notre Dame has not beaten a ranked opponent outside of Navy, who is no longer ranked. They lost to Northern Illinois. Honestly, I don't think they have a resume that puts them into the college football playoff. If they're able, which I think they will be able to beat Army this weekend, a ranked undefeated Army team, then maybe they sort of solidify their chances. But I think South Carolina is better than Notre Dame right now. You look at Indiana, who is 10-0, best record in school history. Who have they beaten? I don't think they played a ranked team. They play Ohio State this weekend. So we'll get to see how good they are. But I think if they lose to Ohio State, even potentially lose in the Big Ten championship game, Indiana doesn't belong in the college football playoff. You look in the ACC, every team in the ACC has 1 loss, as does the SEC. But when you have a Miami team that has struggled to beat a lot of opponents, SMU team who have they played? And then Clemson sitting right there needs one of those teams to lose in order for Clemson to make the ACC championship game. I think if SMU plays Miami in the ACC title game, that eliminates the SMU from the college football playoff talk and allows South Carolina to move a spot. A lot of stuff has to happen. And the argument that I keep hearing is that no 3-loss team should make the college football playoff. But in fairness, anybody that watched the LSU game knows that, thank you, Trey. By the way, speaking about Indiana hasn't beaten anyone with a winning record. So take that for what it's worth as far as an undefeated 10-0 team. But when it comes to a 9-3 South Carolina squad, when Georgia played Tennessee last weekend, there was an argument going around that, well, if Georgia loses to Tennessee, does a 3-loss Georgia team have a way to find the college football playoff? And a lot of people said yes. The same should go for South Carolina, considering that for all intents and purposes, South Carolina should be 8-2 right now. When you have 12 points shaved, and yes, I use the term shaved, when we have 12 points shaved off the board against LSU, that directly impacts the outcome of that game should not count against any sort of third loss that everybody wants to talk about. Yes, we were beaten down by Ole Miss. Yes, without a kicker, with a bad kicker, we weren't able to close the game out against Alabama. But I think the LSU game needs to be an asterisk, and South Carolina needs to be seriously considered if they're able to beat Clemson at the end of the year for an at-large spot in the college football playoff. At the very worst, the number 12 ranking to let them squeeze in and play the number 5 team. So I want to give my shout out. South Carolina has been looking great. I don't care if anybody wants to say, well, they're crap. They couldn't beat anybody in the Big Ten, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, nobody in the SEC wants to play South Carolina right now, and there's a good reason for it. Shout out to my Gamecocks for making this feel like a different year for South Carolina football. That's my Homer's Corner, and instead of Banker Bill coming in to do Homer's Corner with Michael Davis here, he's got something going on this weekend that he wants to talk about in Homer's Corner before we dive into the rest of college football.
Now, I will say this. I listened to your Homer's Corner, and it doesn't surprise me that you took a lot of time to talk about your Gamecocks. We do the cat cave together, and I was like, there's always going to be a Gamecock reference, so I'm not surprised by your Homer's Corner. Now, I want to talk about the Duke VT game coming up this weekend. I'll be there live in attendance, but I had to do it in not a touchdown, shirt or apparel, because I'll be honest, my Duke team's doing good in football. My NFL team, the Dallas Cowboys, are not. So I had to add a little bit of spice with the tap outs and touchdowns today, wearing a wrestling hoodie that you guys can no longer get on shopaew.com because, let's be honest, he wasted some matches there.
No, dude, like that I should have some sort of like blur graphic, because that guy's name isn't allowed on my show anymore. What a bum. All right, continue. I don't mean to cut you off.
I knew you had your Gamecocks there, but no, again, my Dallas Cowboys not doing great. We're looking for tank for Trav right now. My Miami Heat, middle of the pack right now, on some, off some. Duke basketball, there's a lot of high expectations, a lot of high hopes there. The Texas Rangers didn't get back to the playoffs after winning the World Series last year. But there's a team who runs North Carolina now. It is the Duke Blue Devils. Now, I have loved watching Duke this year. This is a different feel for a team. They are ranking at the top of the nation in a lot of key defensive stats. When we're talking about some of the losses, I would say the only bad loss for Duke at 7-3 was that Georgia Tech loss. It came right after Duke came back down 20-0 to beat UNC 21-20. I was there live in attendance for that. Also stormed the field. It was immediately after Western North Carolina got hit with the Hurricane Helene that came through. That was a great pick-me-up as a Duke fan to be there live in attendance. We had a letdown against Georgia Tech, and then we bounced back against a team that everybody's bullied this year, Florida State. But the next two games, I'm going to be honest. Ryan, you're talking about South Carolina getting screwed by LSU. We got screwed by SMU. There were some calls late in that game that were just atrocious. Likewise, the following week against Miami, who's ranked 5th in the nation and is going to be one of the top teams in the college football playoff. But then Duke bounced back 2 weeks ago, rather, against NC State in Raleigh. And I've heard from all the Wolfpack fans, if you're in the North Carolinas like me, you hear it from NC State fans all the time. Oh, we're the best team in football. Not UNC, not Duke, certainly not Wake, not even App State. No, NC State. Well, NC State got their butt handed to them by Duke. And it's all because of the attitude that Manny Diaz has instilled in this team, particularly defense. Manny Diaz, he was the Penn State defensive coordinator, and he made sure to bring that intensity, that aggressiveness to Durham, North Carolina, and this team has bought into it pretty quickly. And it is so nice to see, because for much of the year, Duke didn't allow more than 26 points until they did meet up against SMU and they lost 28-27. And then obviously Cam Ward, you're just going to have to try to outscore him. And that's not what happened. But Duke heading into this Saturday against Virginia Tech, that will be a rocking crowd. I'm super excited for it. Duke is currently 3-point underdogs, but I feel like this team feels like they've been disrespected in a lot of contests, and I feel like they're going to use that momentum and that juice, because we're having guys step up on defense. And Malik Murphy, our quarterback, the guy who transferred from Texas, they're wanting Quinn Ewers, they wanting the next big thing, and Arch Manning. But now Duke has Malik Murphy, who transferred out of Texas. And not only can he pass the ball, but he's starting to utilize his legs a little bit more when Duke needs it. And he's not relying on his legs, but he's using it when the moment calls for it. And Ryan, as much as you like your South Carolina Gamecocks at 3 losses, I like my Duke team at 3 losses. Beating up on Virginia Tech this weekend, going to Wake Forest the following week, the week of Thanksgiving. I think they'll finish this season 9-3, and I don't necessarily see Duke reaching the college football playoff at that point, but I do see them cracking the top 25 and should get a really quality bowl game.
I never thought we would go that much into detail about Duke football on the show, but kudos to you for doing it. Yeah, there's so much to unpack, and I don't want to get into a whole lot of it. 9-3 for Duke in the ACC. It'd be a really good showing considering the rest of the ACC isn't really all that great. But I digress. Kudos to you. We got some comments to get through over on Instagram. 323 College Shame Day had a couple of comments about the conversation of college football playoff. Notre Dame has no business being in the college football playoff. Miami had gotten exposed time and time again. SMU is the top dog in the ACC right now. And he said he'd be more willing to accept Indiana in the college football playoff than most other teams. South Carolina has been getting too much crap against them. That's paraphrasing. And if you look over on Facebook and YouTube, PJ Steven, y'all remember PJ Steven, wrestling show co-host, wanted to know what we thought was more real, the Paul Tyson fight or any football game where the team playing is coached by Bill Belichick. Volley Polly comes in the chat. Speaking of your hoodie, he said a Tap House and Touchdown shirt sounds like a good Christmas present for Volley Polly. I'm not disagreeing with you, Volley Polly, but I just gotta get this shirt made. Like it'll be just that will be like the running joke of like the Jimmy Kimmel show, like his rivalry with Matt Damon. It will just be a running joke that I will always owe you a T-shirt at this point. That's what it's going to come down to. Podcast Smitty, our buddy Shannon Smith in the chat, 2/3 of the Trios champions. Got to be on a show with both of us. We just actually recorded the Cat Cave earlier tonight. Shout out to Shannon. And then PJ wants to know, I can't wait for the guy whose hoodie you're representing to injure himself in the Rumble again. I'm right there with you. And then Shannon Smith says South Carolina's the best 3-loss squad right now, and I couldn't agree more. With that being said, let's get into some college football talk because last weekend was a pretty eventful weekend in college football. Is Georgia Tennessee was sort of the marquee matchup in college football last week. 2 top 10 SEC teams going at it. And Georgia gets the win over Tennessee 31-17. Michael, did you get to see any of this game? Any thoughts about this game, or did it go about the way you expected it to?
It went about the way I expected it to. Now Tennessee, like, give them kudos. But Georgia is just on another level. Like, we're talking about, certain lost teams, like a 2-win team or a 2-loss team, a 3-loss team being created equal. Not Georgia. I mean, Georgia has always had some dogs, and losing to Alabama, losing to Ole Miss, you knew they weren't going to lose to Ole Miss the way that they did and come back and lose against Tennessee, because this was a must win for Georgia. So having a win against Tennessee, having a win against Texas as well earlier in the year, about a month ago, clobbering Clemson at the beginning of the year. Georgia is keeping themselves afloat, and they're keeping themselves very much in the new 12-team college football playoff picture.
Let's see. We got a comment. Shannon Smith, Carson Beck actually threw the ball to his own team. That helps. I kind of want to invite Shannon into the show at this point. Next up, Florida gets a road visit from LSU and brings in DJ Lagway, who had a really bad hamstring injury a couple weeks ago. He's a running quarterback, but did not run much in this game as LSU is pounded by the Florida Gators. I wanted to talk about this with Bill, but Bill's not here. So Mike, did you see this coming? Is LSU just not as good as we thought they were? Or is Florida on the rise after questions surrounding Billy Napier early in the year? Has he sort of silenced his critics with a win over LSU?
I think this says more about LSU than it does Florida. This is 3 straight for LSU. I wasn't a big Nussmeier fan anyways. he's had decent year, 62% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 11 picks. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. That is not what I want to see from an SEC quarterback. But I mean, dude, they've dropped 3 straight. They dropped to Texas A&M, understandable. They got clobbered by Alabama. Again, it's Alabama, but understandable you could lose to Alabama, but Florida, like all 3 of these losses are double-digit losses, Ryan. Like, I mean, at some point you're going to have to like look internally and be like, okay, what's wrong? What's broken? I know they beat your Gamecocks earlier this year.
Yeah,
but
even the 4th loss.
But even that game, it's like, yeah, they should have lost. I think I texted you after that game. I'm like, y'all got robbed. So this LSU team, they probably aren't 6-4. They honestly could probably be about 4-6 right now, especially if you take away that South Carolina game and even Ole Miss. I would think Ole Miss is a better team than LSU.
I mean, listen, I don't know how else to put it. I don't think LSU is that good. Their Notre Dame fans are coming out the woodwork saying the best thing that Brian Kelly ever did was leave Notre Dame. So maybe Simon. And I don't like Brian Kelly particularly much anyway. So kudos to everybody who's able to beat up on LSU, considering South Carolina had that game won and it was stolen from them. So
and
I don't.
And Notre Dame's doing a lot better than Brian Kelly is right now. So I guess who ended up in the Bears position for that?
That's also name bias, but we won't go into that too. Let's talk about the real probably intriguing outcome last weekend. Oregon struggled with Wisconsin and needed a late game interception to knock off Wisconsin 16-13. They still sit atop the AP and the college football playoff polls at number 1. Michael, does Oregon deserve the number 1 spot in college football right now? If you ask me, I would say no.
Why?
The one team they beat, Ohio State, it's sort of like the loss that South Carolina suffered. They had an inexperienced quarterback, wasn't really ready for some of those late game experiences. Not to mention the LSU game, Lenore Sellers gets hurt at the end of the first half, doesn't play the second half. Had a couple opportunities in the Alabama game to throw the right passes, didn't do it. Didn't play well against Ole Miss. I can't say the quarterback's name for Ohio State, but he made that really bad gaffe at the end of that game against Oregon. And maybe we're talking about Oregon not being undefeated and losing to Ohio State. And Ohio State's the number 1 team in the country. What I will say is that Wisconsin is not on the level of some of the SEC teams that have played teams like Texas and Georgia and Ole Miss tight. And a Wisconsin team that's not the Wisconsin of old, almost knocking off Oregon, is not a good look. What I will say, Will Howard's the quarterback. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Yeah.
What I will say is that this has been the first year in a very, very long time that it could literally be anybody's championship to go get.
Oh yeah.
Like every year from going back to 2000, we knew it was going to be Southern Cal, Texas, Florida, Alabama. We knew Auburn under Cam Newton. We knew what teams were going to eventually go on and win the national championship. We don't know who that's going to be this year. But I'm starting to think less and less that it will be Oregon. Speaking of other teams that were looking to have a shot at the college football playoff, Louisville, Kansas State, Washington State went into last weekend ranked, all lost to unranked opponents. They have all fallen out of the top 25 and can kiss any shot at an at-large bid goodbye as they all fall from the rankings. So having said that, I talked a lot about South Carolina. I talked a lot about some teams that maybe should or shouldn't be in. So, Michael, I'm going to pose the question to you. Looking at the college football playoff top 25, are there teams that right now have a decent shot of making it that you don't think should be in? And on the other side of that, are there some teams on the outside of the top 12 that you think deserves a shot at the college football playoff? Well,
obviously, and I want to make a point with this, like Oregon, like they're undefeated right now. So they are the number 1 team until they're not. I'm not going to hold a road victory over Wisconsin, where they struggled a little bit over their head because they are probably the most qualified unbeaten team. Now, Indiana, I can't remember who made the point earlier in the comments about Indiana not beating a team with a win record. But I still think Indiana, if you go undefeated, and this was the problem we had with Florida State last year, is people were like, hey, they didn't have that strong of a schedule, or, their quarterback got hurt, so it won't be a quality game. Florida State should have been in that college football playoff. And Indiana, at some level, I don't think they should be the 5th ranked college football playoff team, but I think they should be somewhere in the top 12 if you go undefeated. But dude, it's tough. Does SMU get in there? Because SMU, they're 9-1. They're in the ACC. They've beaten Pitt. They've beaten Duke, even though I didn't really like that they beat Duke. They beat Louisville. They have a chance to, finish out at a 10-1 record, beating Virginia, beating California. And the most important part of that is it's the ACC. Especially if they were to match up against Miami in a potential championship game, and they were able to play them tough. I think SMU needs to get in. But, dude, I want to give a shout-out Colorado. Currently 16th in that poll, but they feel electric, and they've turned things around. I feel like you should honor this team, even if they don't have necessarily a huge ranked victory this year. I think you got to honor it with how electric this team is. You got Shooter Standers there now. You got Travis Hunter. This might be the most electric and watchable Colorado team that we'll see, period. I don't know if Dion can recruit guys like Travis Hunter again. So I want to see Colorado in this college football playoff. But, dude, it's so hard because it's like, now that we've expanded it from 4 to 12, like that's a good thing, but it's also like you look around and, everybody seems like they've had a bad off week where they have a 1-loss or a 2-loss team, but they could still run the table in the college football playoff. So, dude, I'm very interested to see what the committee decides to do with this 12-team playoff.
I'm gonna say a couple things, and we're gonna move on to the NFL. Florida State didn't deserve to be in the playoff last year. They weren't the 4th best team in the country. They showed that because half the team quit. They got blown out in their bowl game by Georgia, and you could argue that Florida State fans or the Florida State team thought to themselves, well, we knew we were going to lose that game because we didn't deserve to be playing in that game. We deserved to be in the playoff. Well, what better way than to go to the bowl game that they send you to and go out and beat a Georgia team that only got left out of the playoff by losing the SEC championship game? And instead they don't. And now they're the only team in college football to not score 21 points in a single game this year. That's how bad Florida State fell off. That's the team that you thought was good enough to play in the college football playoff last year.
Different team. They are a different team.
Miss me with that. They didn't deserve to be there that last year, period. When it comes to Colorado, listen, they've got BYU to play with in the Big 12 championship game, a 1-loss BYU team. I think whoever wins the Big 12, be it BYU or Colorado, I think the other team is on the outside looking in. As we get another comment. Okay. Mama Frick's going out of the chat for a while. I honestly don't think that Penn State or Indiana, one of the two of them, deserve to be in. Specifically, if Indiana goes on to lose, let's say they lose to Ohio State. I can actually look at their schedule. After Ohio State, they play Purdue. They should be able to beat Purdue. Now, if they lose to Ohio State and turn around and lose to Purdue, Indiana's gone.
Yeah.
If they beat Ohio State and then play for the Big Ten championship over, say, a Penn State, and then they lose to Ohio State again, I think they should be out too. Having said that, I don't think Penn State belongs in the college football playoff. They sit at 9-1 and the number 4 team in the country, but they haven't beaten a single ranked team all season either. The one ranked team that Penn State has played was Ohio State, and they got beat. Trey Toll's back in the chat. I don't agree with the conference champion getting an automatic bid if they're not in the top 12. I'm with you. I don't think like Tulane is looking to win their conference, and I believe that in the AAC they're going to get an automatic bid if that winds up being the case.
That would be weird. That would be really
yes.
weird.
So going back to it, I think one of Penn State or Indiana don't belong in the college football playoff. You could argue if Notre Dame beats Army this weekend, like I expect them to do so, that's two ranked teams, but both of the ranked teams are against the service academies. Volley Poly hopes that Penn State and Indiana both lose, as do I. But I still, Notre Dame's got like one of the worst. Notre Dame may as well have played the Citadel schedule. They didn't play anybody outside of Army and Navy. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. I think they beat Texas A&M at the beginning of the year, but that's it.
Dude, I'm super stuck on this Penn State thing right here. Dude, their defense, only allowing 13.6 points per game. Impressive defense. And they did beat Illinois earlier this year.
That's the one game, and they only scored 21
undefeated.
points. They were undefeated at the time, but they've lost 2 games since then. You want to talk about Penn State's schedule? They beat West Virginia 5-5. Bowling Green 6-4, but it's Bowling Green, and they won by a touchdown. Kent State 0-11. Illinois is the best team they beat up to that point, and they're 7-3. I'm trying to hit back. What are you doing? UCLA 4-6, losing record. Southern Cal they beat by 3. Southern Cal is sitting at 500 right now. Wisconsin 5-5, the same Wisconsin that almost beat Oregon.
Wisconsin was 5-3 after that matchup against Penn State, so they were 5-2 heading into that matchup.
They're still 500. They're not a good football team. South Carolina was like I don't remember their record. They were pretty up there anyway. Then they lose to Ohio State. They beat Washington, coming off a college football playoff appearance themselves. They're 6-5 on the year. And then they beat Purdue, who was 1-9. So who's Penn State beaten? Nobody. Nevertheless, I'll go on from there because we got to get to NFL talk. I think one of Penn State or Indiana shouldn't make it in. I like Miami to win the ACC. They were my pick preseason to win the ACC. And if they do knock off SMU in the ACC championship game, I think that SMU is out. SMU also has to play Virginia and Cal, so they get a pretty easy road to the ACC championship game unless they were somehow able to get knocked off this weekend. I mentioned BYU, Colorado, the loser of that Big 12 championship game is out. You look at Boise State, they're 9-1 in first in the Mountain West. They've got a stud running back. I think their running back should win the Heisman over Travis Hunter, but that's just me. But I would, as a Carolina fan, I'd like to see Boise State lose to going to the end of the year. They get Wyoming and Oregon State. Oregon State will be a big game at the end of the year because if they can't beat Oregon State, I think they fall out of it. But you look at the other teams, I don't think Texas A&M finds a way to win unless they're able to beat Texas and either compete for the SEC championship game or win it. If Clemson's able to beat South Carolina and somehow luck their way into ACC championship game, and obviously if they win it, they're in. But if they're able to sneak their way into the ACC championship game, I think they have an argument for it. And I hate to say this, but I think if Army is able to beat Notre Dame, yes, Genty for Heisman. I'm right there with you, Shannon. If Army's able to go undefeated, I'd be remiss to say that I don't think that they should be in there. But nevertheless, a lot of football left to be played in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We wanted to get into some of the biggest games to watch this weekend. I'm just going to tell you the games that you should be watching this weekend to save you all the time. There is some football going on right now. But as far as games go, you've got Ole Miss, Florida. That has playoff implications. Florida just knocked off LSU. If Florida could somehow get another home upset, they're a 10.5-point dog against Ole Miss this weekend. It'd be interesting to see what happens if Ole Miss loses to Florida. Wake Forest, a 25-point dog to Miami. Don't see that happening. Obviously, your marquee matchup is Indiana, Ohio State, number 5 at number 2. I look at the rest of the schedule. You got some teams playing cupcakes, right? Like Carolina's playing Wofford, Citadel's playing Clemson, Georgia gets a cupcake this weekend. BYU, Arizona State will be a huge game to watch. Arizona State got a big win last week. They're 8-2. They take on 9-1 BYU. Arizona State sits third in the Big 12. So if they're able to knock off BYU, they might sneak their own way into a Big 12 championship game.
If you haven't watched Scatabo play for Arizona State, you need to, by the way. That is a player to look out for.
Dude, I'm with you, man. It's good stuff. Then you got Alabama, Oklahoma. Preseason looked to be good. Army, Notre Dame. That's a 7:00 kickoff over. It should be on I'm assuming NBC. That'll be a fun game to watch with college football playoff implications. And if you care, if you're a West Coast bias team, USC plays UCLA this weekend. So some decent college football to watch. But then obviously rivalry weekends right around the corner where you're going to get to see some teams. As they say on the Red Zone channel, it's the witching hour for college football because a lot of teams are going to make or break their season on rivalry weekend. Michael, let's go over to the NFL and let's start off in Buffalo, where the Buffalo Bills knock off the Kansas City Chiefs. The Miami Dolphins of 1970, whatever, were able to pop the champagne as the Kansas City Chiefs become the last team to take a loss in this 2024 NFL season. The Chiefs have been sort of flirting with a lot of losses this year. Does it say more about the fact that Buffalo's for real, or was this just inevitable that at some point Kansas City needed to lose, and there's not much really to say about this?
Well, it's usually the Bills having the number of the Chiefs in the regular season. It's just when they meet in the playoffs, it's Kansas City. By the way, Chiefs, give them credit. I mean, they are back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions. And rather than laying an egg and coasting through the regular season to be the last remaining unbeaten team at 9-0, like you're halfway through the regular season before a team like the Buffalo Bills was able to dethrone you, and it was in Buffalo. I'm not entirely convinced if this was in Kansas City that the Bills would have won by 9 points. I think the Chiefs would have won a home game, which honestly would be how it shapes up more than likely in the playoffs is the Bills going back against the Chiefs, and the Chiefs probably wouldn't lose to the Bills twice in a year. So as crazy as this sounds, this loss might have done the Chiefs some good. And on out of pocket this week, I still kept the Chiefs at number 1 on my top quarter rankings.
Of course you would. Of course you would. They're not the best team in the NFL is the Detroit Lions, and you know it.
No, they're
Stop
not.
it.
They're the second best.
They're the number 1 team in the NFL now.
They both have 1 loss right now.
Yeah. And the Lions have been more dominant in all their wins than Kansas City has been in any of their wins. And I'm not saying they played worse teams. It's not like college football. Every NFL team has NFL talent, with maybe the exception of the Dallas Cowboys. But the fact of the matter remains is that the Detroit Lions are putting it on. There's one game that they won that they probably shouldn't have won. And that was against the Houston Texans, who's a really good football team. That Detroit showed their ability, their grit to be able to come back and get that win out of the grips of defeat. You can say what you want, and I'm not trying to turn this into a whole debate here, but the Detroit Lions are better than the Kansas City Chiefs right now. If they played today, and the Super Bowl was today, and it was this Detroit Lions without Aiden Hutchinson, without Alex Anzalone, against this Kansas City Chiefs team, you put them in a best-of-3 series, and Detroit sweeps. I'm just going to say that, and that's a bonus Homer's Corner for you people.
By the way, I'm just going to throw in here the Lions' 1 loss was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Chiefs took care of
that business. Was when the Bucs were still good, though. That was before they lost business. That was before they lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, dude. That was when they were still good.
I'm sorry. The Lions beating the Jaguars and beating the brakes off the Cowboys this year and beating the brakes off the Titans.
That was before the Cowboys were hurt. They beat the crap out of a decent Cowboys team.
No,
it just turned out to not be as good.
We were hurt.
Y'all
were off a bye.
You still had Dak. You still had CD. And you hurt Aiden Hutchinson.
We didn't have Michael Parsons.
You know what's really funny is in that game against the Dallas Cowboys, Aiden Hutchinson broke his leg and still got a sack against Dak Prescott on the play that he broke his leg. That's the kind of monster that Aiden Hutchinson is that the Dallas Cowboys don't have. I'm just going to throw that out. All right, let's move on here. In other news in the NFL, water is wet, and the New York Jets fired Joe Douglas, the general manager who drafted guys like Sauce Gardner and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson the GM that was behind building a decent roster that was all screwed up because the owner of the New York Jets wanted Aaron Rodgers way past his prime. Every year I try to think about a franchise that continues to fall more and more from grace, and like, who's going to be the next Cleveland Browns, or like at one point, like, who's going to be the next Oakland Raiders, or even to an extent the Houston Texans before they drafted CJ Stroud.
Or Detroit Lions in their 0-16 pitfalls.
That's fair. That's a fair comparison. Or the Carolina Panthers post David Tepper's purchase, the worst owner in sports, tanking the franchise.
Host of the Cat Cave.
I said it on tonight's show. I called him the worst owner every chance I get. Anyway, are the New York Jets at least a bottom 5 franchise in the NFL? Like what are we doing here? Like they thought it was Robert Saleh's fault. Clearly it wasn't. And now they fire the guy who's drafting the people that are the most talented on this team. Like, and not to mention Aaron Rodgers has come out and said that he wants to run it back next year. Like, what do we do with the New York Jets?
Bro, I would, to think of the bottom 5, I would automatically put the Panthers there. I'd put the Raiders. I'd put the Titans. I'd put the Browns. I'd put the Jaguars. And then I'm going the 2 New York teams, the Jets and Giants, which if you look at that list, they are all struggling this year. And by no surprise either. It's weird because, I read the comment of the New York Jets firing their general manager, and I thought the next name I would see is Aaron Rodgers, because Rodgers is playing general manager. He's getting his buddy Devontae Adams. He's getting his buddy Alan Lazard. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been in control of at least who's been on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, he's the LeBron James of the NFL right now. Except, I don't like either one of them, but at least LeBron is still physically able to put a performance out on a certain game. Like Aaron Rodgers can't right now.
There's so much. To compare Aaron Rodgers to LeBron James is an insult to LeBron James. Like, people have the argument who's a better quarterback. First of all, Volley probably wants to know if the Jets owner is worse than David Tepper. No, because because the Jets owner didn't give away their entire draft stock to go out and sign Aaron Rodgers.
And the Jets owner actually inquired about benching Aaron Rodgers.
Yep. So, I've already lost track of what I was saying a second ago. Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James. Nobody, and The Rock means nobody, has ever in some way insinuated that Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback, the best NFL player of all time. The fact that there's a debate, Jordan and LeBron, comparing Aaron Rodgers to LeBron James just because he's trying to general manager his own team, I think is an insult.
That was the comparison. That was the comparison, not necessarily their impact on the game or them as a whole. It's going to a team and just ripping up the roster based on how you want it.
Well,
play the game. Don't be the GM.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I don't even know where to go from that other than the transition is this, because I think there's a roster that might need to get blown up and tore down and start over from scratch, and that is your Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott out for the year with a hamstring injury that he needed surgery on. They haven't been able to really put a run game together since they let go of a Ezekiel Elliott that was in the decline. You got a bunch of running backs on this team that if 10 years ago you said that your running back core was Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott, you'd be doing pretty well in the run game. But you let go of Amari Cooper for peanuts, and so now all you've got is CeeDee Lamb. Dalton Schultz was let go in lieu of Jake Ferguson, who hasn't really done much this year either. And now, Rico, you went and signed Ezekiel Elliott back. You went out and signed Dalvin Cook. And former Gamecock Rico Dowdle is now your RB1. I know you've got some talent on defense, despite the fact that you couldn't re-sign Stephon Gilmore in the offseason. But, like, at one point, you've got a bunch of money wrapped up in CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. That doesn't allow room to go out and sign some big-name free agents to try to put around these guys to make them even a contender to win their own division. Like when is it time that we say that it's reboot time in Dallas?
I don't think it's reboot time, um, because you still gotta think, like, the past 3 years, this team, which pretty close to the same roster, were 12-win teams back to back to back seasons. The no other team did that, not even the Kansas City Chiefs. Um, it sucks because Mike McCarthy got no help from Jerry Jones in the offseason when you could have re-signed Dak Prescott 5 months sooner and had enough money cleared up this year to go sign Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley and keep him out of Philadelphia, or, go get Joe Mixon, or go get Josh Jacobs. Like, go get one of the top 5 running backs right now who are on their second team and their second contract, or even third contract. But instead, they wanted to pinch pennies and they wanted to wait to the very last minute to re-sign Dak, which I like that they re-signed Dak. I liked that they re-signed CD Lamb. But I mean, dude, this season was just, I mean, it was a bear to get through. I'm still trying to get through it. When
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
But when Dak goes on IR, like, it was already falling apart. We finished the game Monday night with 2 of our 5 starting offensive linemen. We played well over a month with our 5th and 6th string defensive ends. Lawrence out, Parsons out, Nealon out, Williams tore his ACL in the preseason. Deron Bland, who led the league in interceptions last year, hasn't played a game yet. Trayvon Diggs is hopping and hobbling around just because he's the only corner out there. Jordan Lewis missed this past week's game. Kalen Carson missed about a month. Like, dude, when it rains, it's poured. And Jerry didn't do any favors in the offseason. But instead of, like, blowing this roster up and starting from scratch, I really feel like Mike McCarthy just got the short end of the stick. He's going to be the scapegoat. He's going to be the Jack Perry of the Dallas Cowboys, and he's just going to be out. But if Dallas gets an offensive, innovative mind, probably from like the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, would be preferred, then Dallas could, find a wrinkle in the offense and get some motion going and get CD Lamb open more often. Start using guys like Kavontae Turpin and get a legit running back. And for the love of God, just replace Terrence Steele at right tackle. And if this team's healthy next year, they have a shot to win the NFC East. But you need to give them help if you're GM Jerry.
Let me ask you a question, Nate, or let me put you on the spot here. Name one general manager worse than Jerry Jones.
Can we throw in David Tepper? Does he count?
He's the owner now. No, that's listen. It's it's one. Listen, we got to get the fantasy football talk, and we got to get the podcast pick 'em. So let's go ahead and move on from here. I wanted to ask a question as far as one more NFL question when it comes to the most surprising teams in the NFL. Give me your one biggest surprise good team in the NFL this season, and give me your one biggest surprise bad team in the NFL. I'll hold on real quick. Trey Davis says Dak had the benefit of having a great offensive line most of his career, and he thinks that Dallas overpaid Dak twice. Okay, so Michael, biggest surprise good team, biggest surprise disappointment in the NFL this year.
I would say the biggest surprise good team is Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin shouldn't have done that with the roster he has. He should be a candidate for Coach of the Year, truly. If you don't believe that, I am so sorry for you. Disappointing, obviously, Dallas. Not to say Dallas would have won this division, but Dallas, if you look at all the statistics and even the injuries, it's been a disappointing time for the Cowboys. If I didn't pick the Cowboys, I'd probably go Miami, because even with Tua's injury, this offense should have done more.
I'm with you. I like your Pittsburgh pick because I picked them to once again have a losing season. That won't happen this year. I'll give you my surprising good pick is the Washington Commanders. I mean, this team had a high draft pick last year. moved on from and went out and got Jaden Daniels out of LSU. And they've been a very, very surprising breath of fresh air over in the NFC East, sitting second in that division, only behind the Philadelphia Eagles at this point in the season. Surprisingly bad. Give me the Cincinnati Bengals. Like I don't know why they just can't get right there. 4-7 on the season. They're still not out of it from a wild card standpoint, but when you've got a division with the Ravens and the Steelers that can beat anybody on any given Sunday, you can't start off slow. And I think at some point you've got Jamar Chase. You're going to re-sign. I can't remember. I think they gave T. Higgins a contract. But they should have never let Joe Mixon go. Their running game's not the same. And something's not right. And I think at some point, you talk about having a reboot. I don't think they're going to need to blow up the entire roster, but something needs to change in Cincinnati, or kind of like what the Detroit Lions did with both Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson. You're going to waste the prime of some of the best players to ever play for your franchise. And you can't do that with guys like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. Yes, I agree, Shannon. Cincinnati's coach ought to be ashamed of himself. Totally agree. All right, guys, let's get into some fantasy football talk. Banker Bill sent in his picks for these, but if you remember from before we were gone for 2 weeks, we have fantasy footballs, bullies, buys, and sells, and today will be Michael's factor crap. Shannon had me thrown off here going in the chat, and I'm going to give you some quarterbacks that you can think about playing this week. Some players you think about playing in fantasy this week. Some players you should be sitting down. Benjamin in the chat over on YouTube says the pick 2, CeeDee Lamb, Pickens, and Hunt, full point PPR. I hate to say it, I'd probably go the wide receivers because there's a chance that Pacheco plays this week. And if Isaiah Pacheco comes back, you're not starting Hunt. If Pacheco doesn't play, you're probably starting Hunt, and I would say Pickens. Would you agree, Mike?
I don't trust Lamb makes me super questionable with how that offense is played, especially against Washington. I would lean more to sitting CeeDee Lamb.
Well, to give you a heads up, the last time we did this, I went 4-4 on the week. Baker Bill went 2-6. That puts us as an even 40-32 on the season. So let's try to win you some fantasy football games, or you're making playoff pushes this season. This week, my quarterback that I'm buying should go as no surprise, and that's Jared Goff. 4 or 5 touchdowns last week, no interceptions a week after having 5 interceptions. Volley Polly says he wants to hear wrong again, Ryan, from you. Jared Goff projected 19 points at the Indianapolis Colts, giving up the 9th most points to opposing quarterbacks in fantasy. Mike, if you don't know how this works, you're gonna give me a fact if you think he's going to exceed that projection, or a crap if you don't think so. So fact or crap, 19 points for Jared Goff.
Crap. I feel like you can have Gibbs. I feel like you can have Montgomery get a lot more fantasy points for you. And maybe it's a blowout and Jared Goff starts sitting a little bit more.
Let's see. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. I mean, Jared Goff did have 44 fantasy points last week, but it was just the lowly Jaguars. Let's go to my running back that I'm buying this week, and that goes to Brian Robinson Jr., the running back for Washington. Made his return from injury this past week and had a pretty stellar game alongside fellow running back Austin Eckler. Robinson is projected 16.5 points at home this week against your Dallas Cowboys, who are currently giving up the 4th most points to opposing running backs in fantasy. Factor crap, he exceeds 16.5 this week.
Joe Mixon scored 3 touchdowns on Monday night. This is a fact. Unfortunately, this is a fact.
All right, let's go over to wide receiver. My wide receiver I'm buying this week. It's the 2nd consecutive week since we missed a week doing this where I'm buying it on Ladd McConkey, projected 13.6 fantasy points. He is at home against the Baltimore Ravens, who are giving up the most points, and that's 32nd, not 37, 30 in this. I'm going to fix that while I was going across the screen.
32.
They're giving up the most points to opposing wide receivers in fantasy this season, Mike, factor crap, 13.6 points for Lad McConkey.
I'm going to go fact just because I'm seeing the connection a little bit more between Herbert and McConkey. But that surprises me that Baltimore's given up the most to wide receivers in fantasy this season. That shocks me.
Yep. Listen, it's according to ESPN, so take it up with them. My tight end, I picked this guy up at the witching hour last weekend, and I didn't start him. I won my game anyway, but Jonnu Smith, tight end for the Miami Dolphins, had 2 touchdowns last week. He has projected a mere 10.4 fantasy points this weekend against the Patriots at home, who are giving up the 13th fewest opposing points to 13th fewest points to opposing tight ends in fantasy this season. Sunday 1:00 kickoff in Miami. Listen, if he finds the end zone once, I don't know what it is because they get a lot of weapons on that offense. You talked about the fact that Miami's disappointing in that their offense has not been putting up. I know it's low-hanging fruit, volley poly. Get off me. Get off my low-hanging fruit. But with all the talent between Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Odell Beckham Jr., Raheem Mostert, and Devon Achane, Jonnu Smith seems to be getting more and more comfortable in this offense every week. Give me all of Jonnu Smith this weekend. Mike, what say you? 10.4 for Jonnu Smith, fact or crap?
Well, I mean, look at what he's done. Third most receptions on the team right now in his first season, 448 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's not done terrible. I'll say that. He has not done bad, but I don't think he's going to have that big of a game as he did early or last week, if you will. And going back to the Dolphins-Patriots game earlier this year, Jonnu Smith had 5 catches, 62 yards. It's his full PPR. That would be 11.2 points. So it's very close to that 10.4. I think Gerard Mayo is actually going to have an answer for Jonnu Smith. I'm going to say crap.
I love the analysis, but you're going to be wrong on this one. Matter of fact, I'll be honest with you. Banker Bill factored on all of my buys except for Jonnu Smith. He said crap for that one as well. Let's go over to my quarterback sell for this week, and that should go no surprise that it's Sam Darnold. The chariot has turned back into a pumpkin for Sam Darnold. He has projected 20 points on the road at Chicago, giving up the fewest points to opposing quarterbacks in fantasy this season. I know he's got a healthy Justin Jefferson. He's got a healthy why can't I say his name? Who's the second wide receiver
Jordan
in
Addison.
Minnesota? Jordan Addison, thank you. But Chicago kept Jordan Love in check last week. I think they're going to be able to keep Sam Darnold in check this week. Factor crap, Sam Darnold goes under that 20-point projection this week against the Bears.
Fact, it's the Bears. They need to step up right now because Caleb has put the team on his back, and they should be 6-4 rather than 4-6 right now. They know it's a big game. They're going to keep Sam under that 20-point mark.
All right, let's go to my running back, and this one hurts me because I was all in on Nick Chubb preseason after he came back from injury, but I'm selling Nick Chubb this week. He's projected a lowly 11 points at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the Steelers are giving up the 11th fewest points to opposing running backs in fantasy this season. Not to mention this is a short week. This is Thursday night football. I don't like a lot of people who play on Thursday night football, so I'm selling Nick Chubb. Mike, factor crap, Nick Chubb under this 11 points.
Did you see what the Steelers defense did against Derrick Henry, the best running back in the NFL last week? This is
first
a fact.
fumble in like 300 carries. Yeah.
This is a fact.
All right. Let's go to my wide receiver that I'm selling this week. This one hurts me more, and I'm selling Deebo Samuel, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers. He is currently projected 14 points playing on the road at the Green Bay Packers, who are giving up the 10th fewest points to opposing wide receivers this season. Deebo Samuel played last week, and it looked, for whatever reason, like Jawan Jennings is the new go-to receiver with the injuries, all the injuries that the San Francisco dealt with this year, including the Brandon Ayuk one after his holdout. And last week, Jawan Jennings stepped up and just caught everything that they threw to him, and they threw a lot to him. I'm selling Deebo Samuel this week. Mike, what say you? Factor crap under 14 points for Deebo Samuel.
So I would say This would be a fact because Christian McCaffrey's there and because he's part of the offense. But Debo, he really just needs one long play that could really get him close to that 14 mark. I'm going to say this is crap, and Debo barely gets over that 14 mark.
All right, finally, I'm going to sell tight end Sam Laporta, another very hurtful one. He's projected right now 10.4 points at the Colts, who are giving up a lot of points. They're giving up the 6th most points to opposing tight ends. But Sam Laporta didn't play last week due to an injury. I'm not sure he plays again this week. Real quick, Brunson Burner over on YouTube wants to know, would you trade Isaiah Pacheco? Tracy. I'm not sure who Tracy is. If it's who I think it is, the guy from New York. No, keep Pacheco. Keep Pacheco. You're going to want a Pacheco for your playoff run. Do not give away trade Isaiah Pacheco. Getting back to Sam Laporta, the Detroit Lions lost Alex Anzalone to a broken forearm last week. The Lions want to maintain and hold on to that number 1 spot in the NFC. They are not going to put Sam Laporta at risk for it to further his injury. If he's not good to go, he's not going to play. So despite the fact that I will say this, if Laporta doesn't play, you could probably stream Brock Wright at tight end, playing against a pretty giving Indianapolis Colts defense. So Michael Davis, knowing everything that I said, factor crap, Sam Laporta under 10.4 fantasy points.
Wow. That is kind of crazy that you would say that. He's hit or miss each week. So he's boomed, which means he's gotten over double-digit points, and then he's come back the next week and flopped. Houston, he had 15.6. He's set against the Jaguars. And so going up against the Colts, I think he's going to bust, if you will, and I don't think he reaches this mark of 10.4.
All right, that's been Bullies, Buys, or Sells, and Michael Davis's Factor Crap. We do have a comment. Volley Polly wants to know, who are we more excited to watch on Thanksgiving? Bullies, Bills, or MD? I'm assuming he means, are we excited more to watch the Lions or the Cowboys? I can't remember the other team that plays, but Mike, are you excited to watch the Cowboys on Thanksgiving?
We play the Giants, so maybe.
Listen, I'll be honest. I'm not looking forward to watching the Lions play on Thanksgiving because we lose on Thanksgiving. Regardless of who we play, we don't play well on Thanksgiving Day. Maybe they eat too much turkey pregame, but I'm not looking forward to it. Although it's football and my team's playing, so I'll be invested. We're past time, so we're going to try to run through this real quick. Podcast Pick'em week 11 because we missed a couple of weeks making picks, so we're only at week 11 right now. The last time out, Banker Bill and I both went 3-2, which gives us an overall season record. Banker Bill 22-28. Your guy Bully Rye at 24-26. Michael Davis will be the first guest picker of the season. Banker Bill has also sent in his picks, so we'll get to see what he says. Let's start off in the world of college football. Is number 5 Indiana. Again, your guy Bully Rye can't spell as he's in a hurry. Number 5 Indiana on the road at number 2 Ohio State, a 13.5-point home favorite. This is your big noon kickoff over on Fox at Ohio Stadium in Columbus, Ohio. Banker Bill and I both took Ohio State. Michael Davis, what say you? Indiana, do they cover this 13.5-point spread on the road?
Do they cover? Yes. Do they win? No.
So you're taking Indiana. Let me go ahead and put this in here, and now that I can actually spell it.
Plug it in there. Plug it in there.
Next up, we've got the Big 12 showdown between the number 2 and the number 3, or the number 1 and the number 3 teams in the Big 12. The number 14 BYU, is it Cougars, take on the number 21 Arizona State. Is it Sun Devils?
It is
Arizona State, a 3-point home favorite. They're getting the home field advantage boost here with that point spread. It's a Saturday 3:30 kickoff over on ESPN, playing in Tempe, Arizona. Mike, what say you? BYU at Arizona State.
This one is for you. Mouth it off with Mike, who hosts the Nightcap over on Boom Broadcasting. I'm going to take your Sun Devils to win at home and beat them by more than 3 points, probably by 11.
Listen, I wouldn't be upset about that. Banker Bill and I both took Arizona State. Let's go over to the world of the NFL. Banker Bill's Miami Dolphins host the New England Patriots, and they are a 7-point home favorite against the New England Patriots. Sunday, 1 o'clock kickoff over on CBS. Banker Bill and I both have the Dolphins. Michael Davis, what say you? Dolphins hosting the Patriots.
I don't have much faith in the Patriots. I also don't have much faith in the Miami Dolphins. This is a division game. This is going to be a close game. Both teams are struggling right now, and I'm going to have the Patriots losing, but they do cover, and they lose by about 3.
All right, he's got the Patriots. We both have the Dolphins. Let's go on to the next game. An NFC West showdown, if I can get back to my screen here. Arizona Cardinals traveling to the Seattle Seahawks, it's basically a pick 'em. This is a 1-point spread for the Seattle Seahawks. The Arizona Cardinals sit atop the NFC West at this very moment. This is a 4:25 kickoff over on Fox. Michael Davis, what say you? Seattle's the favorite at home against the Cardinals.
Again, this is a division game. It's very tough. It is in Seattle, but I've been impressed by Arizona. Jonathan Gannon's doing a pretty decent job. Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner. I'm going to take Arizona.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I like the Cardinals. There's no really explanation to it. Kyler Murray being healthy is playing like Kyler Murray before he ever got hurt. I've got Arizona in this game as well, but Banker Bill has taken the Seattle Seahawks to get the win at home. And then finally, your Monday Night Football game over on ESPN. A couple of teams coming off some big games this past weekend. The Ravens had a loss to the Steelers. The Chargers a big win. I can't even remember who they played now.
Bengals.
The Bengals. Yep. It was Monday Night Football game against the Bengals Sunday Night Football where they had a big lead, gave it up, and then came back to win anyway. The Baltimore Ravens are a 3-point road favorite at the Los Angeles Chargers over on Monday Night Football. Let's see. Baker, Bill, and I both have the Baltimore Ravens getting the win. Michael Davis, what say you? Ravens at Chargers.
I would go ahead and say like Jim Harbaugh is doing a phenomenal job with the Chargers, but there's so much talent, and Baltimore's coming off a loss. Last time they came off a loss was against the Cleveland Browns, and then they came back and took care of business the following week after that Browns loss. They decimated the Broncos 41-10. I don't think it's going to be that devastating of a loss, but I do think Baltimore comes back and wins by at least a touchdown against the Chargers.
All right. That has been your podcast pick'em for this week. That's the end of the show. We're in overtime. We really don't have time for overtime because we're overtime as it is. But I do want to take this opportunity. Michael Davis, thank you for coming on short notice and joining the show. Is there anything that you would like to promote or say before we go ahead and sign off tonight?
Yeah, guys. Appreciate y'all. I know you've seen me on Cat Cave and a couple appearances on Tap Outs and Touchdowns. But if you're familiar with my stuff for Out of Pocket or Drop the Mic, that is over on the Boom Broadcasting YouTube channel as of July 1st. So we're a little over 4 months away. We're also really close to 500 subscribers over on YouTube. Podcast Smitty has a show on there, as well as countless others. It's a huge team. It's growing. There's wrestling, there's football, there's basketball, there's baseball. There's a TV show review. So wherever you find, if you guys haven't already, just go hit subscribe, help support and support the team. It's a really awesome team to be a part of. I'm grateful for them, and it's always a great time with my guy Bully Rye.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I don't have.
Oh, wow.
That's not it. Look at that. Switching it up out of nowhere. I was trying to find the banner that had your socials that I could post on the screen, but of course I can't find that while I'm on the fly here. Oh, here we go. Give me a second. If you want to make sure you want to go and follow him on Instagram at @outofpocket_TRSR. Or at
it's underscore boom. It's underscore boom now. So
it's out of pocket underscore boom. Oh, that's right. Here, let me fix that. So if you want to make sure you go and follow either of these shows on Instagram, it's at bottom of the screen right now. Tell them where they can go find Boom Broadcasting on social media.
Yeah, it's Boom Broadcasting everywhere except Twitter or X is Boom Broadcasts because they wouldn't let us have the ing.
There you go. Well, if you want to follow this show that Michael Davis is on now, go to facebook.com/tapouts and touchdowns. I'm on X at tapouts and TDs and YouTube at tapouts and touchdowns. Or you can go find me on Instagram at Ryan Frick Comedy. Take this opportunity to go ahead and thank anybody and everybody who was part of the show tonight, be it Volley Polly. Shannon Smith was in the was in the chat a lot. Trey Tolles, good to see you back after we took a little break. We will be back next week, I believe. Bankerville and I plan on recording on Tuesday. We may go live on Tuesday, but being it is that next week is Thanksgiving week and rivalry weekend, we do want to get in. We want to get in the show and talk some football before Thanksgiving week. And so we're planning on either going live or recording Tuesday to launch on Wednesday. So a little change in schedule, but we will be around for that. And then at some point I'll have another wrestling episode on the show. Lots of stuff going on in the world of professional wrestling, but I haven't been able to keep up with it all, with everything that I've had going on. If you are in the upstate of South Carolina area, next Friday, Black Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, I will be in a comedy show, a free comedy show. I'm trying to find the poster at Modern Cigars of Greenville. That's at 203 East Butler Road, Suite A in Malden, South Carolina. Super Dad Jones will be headlining and hosting that show. Come out and get some laughs there. Also, if you are in the Monroe, North Carolina area on December 6th, there is a comedy competition hosted by Eulalio, and I'm not going to butcher this last name, Magana. It will be 7 other comedians and myself competing for a cash prize in a stand-up comedy competition at The Spot, 1513 Concord Avenue in Monroe, North Carolina, on December 6th. I'll pitch that show again on next week's show. But if you're looking to go find a comedy show and support your local comedians, either one of those shows is a good opportunity to do so. Thanks for everybody who joined the show and watched with us tonight. Thank you to Michael Davis, who was able to take time out of his day and come be a part of the show. And we'll see you next week. For Michael Davis, it's your guy, Billy Rye, and we'll see you next time right here on Tap Outs and Touchdowns.